Hi, welcome to Jiva Yoga Live. I'm Jenna, and today we're going to learn which yoga poses to avoid during menstruation. Have you ever been looking forward to doing your evening yoga practice when all of a sudden you're met with your period earlier in the day? You might be feeling cramps or low energy levels, and you might be left wondering, what yoga poses should I avoid during menstruation? Can I even do my practice at all? Well, today we'll take a deep dive on period yoga and talk about which yoga poses to avoid during menstruation. And I'll also give you some alternatives so you can continue your practice during your period. During menstruation, the woman's pelvis goes through a cleansing process. The ligaments and joints of the pelvis begin to soften so that it can expand and allow for the release of the old uterine lining. This is what you experience as menstrual bleeding. Now, there's several changes that take place in a woman's body hormonally, and you might want to avoid certain yoga poses during this time, especially if you have period symptoms such as cramps, bloating, headaches, or other problems that you don't want to exacerbate. So I'll give you some tips on which poses you may want to steer clear of during menstruation. Now, there are no hard and fast rules here, so I want you to know that you are the only expert of your body, and you really need to use your own discretion to determine what types of practices are best for you. So with that being said, the first classification of postures that I would recommend avoiding while on your period are strong inversions. So these poses would be handstand, headstand, and shoulder stand. Anything where your hips and pelvis is brought above your heart. And the reason for this is that during menstruation, there's a subtle energy in the body which becomes more activated during this time. This energy is known as apana vayu, and it's actually a downward and outward force that begins at the abdomen and moves downward in the body. Now, the main function of this force is for excretion of waste products. So this force works at all times, actually, in the human body for both men and women to excrete our urine and feces. However, for a woman during menstruation, it also works to release the old endometrial lining down and out through the vagina. So one recommendation is to not go against this natural force that's really prevalent during this time. So that's why we don't want to flip the body upside down, because it would actually work against the downward and outward force of apana vayu. Now, if you still want to relieve some pressure in your lower extremities, there is a posture that I would recommend trying, which is just a simple legs up the wall posture. In the legs up the wall posture, you're still reversing the blood flow in your lower extremities to move downward towards the heart. However, you're keeping your pelvis and your back stable while lying against the floor. Again, the hips are not lifted above the heart, so we're not moving against that natural force of apana vayu that's prevalent during menstruation. So let me demonstrate here for you how you could get into the legs up the wall position. I know I don't have a wall, but it doesn't matter. You can still do this with any surface or just by yourself. I like to put a blanket underneath my hips just for some extra cushioning. If you do have a wall available, I would recommend sitting sideways. So let's say the wall would be right here. I'm sitting with my hips right up against the wall and both of my legs to one side. Then what I'm gonna do is slowly begin to shift so that both legs are raised up, either in the air or resting against the wall. As you can see, my pelvis is anchored into the earth and my back is relaxed. Now you can breathe deep in and out through your nose here for as long as you wish, fully relaxing your entire body. Feel the blood gently run down the legs, through the pelvis, and into the heart space. To come out of this posture whenever you feel ready, there's no rush. You're gonna bend your knees, sliding them down the wall, turning to one side, and resting in the fetal position. This allows the blood to rebalance itself and avoids any dizziness that could occur after reversing the blood flow in the legs. Then using your hands to press you back up into a comfortable seated position. So that's legs up the wall, a great alternative to handstand, headstand, or shoulder stand while you're on your period. The next classification of postures that I would recommend steering clear of during menstruation are strong arm balance postures. So these are postures where the entire weight of your body is on your hands and arms. Examples of this would be crow pose or scorpion pose. So now there's a couple of reasons why you may want to steer clear of these postures during menstruation. The first of which is that when a woman is on her period, she's actually going through a cleansing process. Her body is getting rid of old tissues that are no longer needed. When the body is cleansing itself, energy levels may be lower than usual. So you may want to avoid strong poses that would cause you to exert a lot of energy for this reason. It's better to conserve your energy while going through this time of cleansing. Another reason is that these postures require a lot of strong abdominal and core work. Now, especially if you have issues with period cramps or bloating or just general discomfort in the pelvis while on your period, you don't want to put additional pressure on the abdomen and the pelvis. Through contracting these muscles, you may actually bring about heavier bleeding. So it may be better for you to, again, skip the arm balances and go for something that'll strengthen your arms while still not building pressure inside of the pelvic and abdominal cavities. A pose that I would recommend to try instead would be standing arm circles in Tadasana. All right, so join me in a comfortable standing position, also known as Tadasana. You want your feet to be hip-width distance apart with your toes facing forward. Now, in this position, I want you to gently engage the muscles of the abdomen. But again, we're not putting a lot of pressure on this region. Rather, it's just a gentle sucking in motion. Your back is straight, stretching the crown of your head towards the sky. Take a deep breath. On your next inhale, lift your arms out to the sides so that you're like a letter T here. We're going to begin making small arm circles with your hands. As you breathe and root your feet down and into the earth, begin making gentle circles. Over time, begin making the circles larger and larger. Eventually, you're going to be making the biggest circle that you possibly can. Run through 3 times with these large circles, stopping at the bottom, and then reversing the circles in the opposite direction. This time we're going to go from large circles to making progressively smaller circles. Keep your abs engaged. Surprisingly, you'll feel this in your arms. There you go. Allow the circles to get smaller and smaller until eventually you wind up in the original position. Inhale, stretch your arms out and the crown of your head up. Exhale, slowly allow your arms to come down to your sides. Feel the difference in your arms and your shoulders. The third category of postures that I would recommend avoiding while on your period are deep back bending postures. And again, there's a couple of reasons for this. So deep back bends would include postures such as camel pose, bow pose, or full wheel pose, where the back is in a very exaggerated arch. These postures will build pressure in the abdominal and pelvic region, which we want to avoid, of course, to steer clear of making worse any period symptoms you may be experiencing. Also, during menstruation, the ligaments, which are the connective tissue between the bones of the pelvis and the lower back, actually become more soft and pliable. This means it's a lot easier to overstretch the pelvis and the back during this time. Now, because these back bends are intense, you can actually throw out your lower back a lot easier when you're on your period due to increased flexibility. So this is why I would recommend avoiding these postures. In addition, because of the increased movement within the pelvic cavity, it's easy for the organs placed inside of the pelvis, such as the uterus and the ovaries, to move their position during menstruation. So again, we want to avoid these postures to steer clear of any movement, excessive movement that might happen to the position of the uterus and the ovaries during this time. So what would I recommend instead? Well, gentle back bending postures can actually be quite beneficial, and it's really important that you listen to your body. I would recommend Cobra Pose during this time, a low cobra, so that the pelvis is anchored into the earth and there's less chance for extreme mobility in the ligaments and the organs of the pelvis. So let's try this. I'll demonstrate. You're going to come onto your mat here, laying on your stomach. Your hands are planted right near your armpits, and your elbows are tucked in to your body. You want to press the tops of your feet into the mat as you squeeze your legs together and gently press your pelvis down into the earth. On your inhale, lift your head, neck, and chest off of the mat, using the strength of your upper back to hold you up. Little to no weight is in your hands here. As you breathe, inhale, lifting the crown of your head towards the sky. Feel the stretch in the abdominal cavity. On the exhale, slowly lower down, stacking your forearms in front of you, resting your forehead on your forearms. Rest here. You can bend your knees, lifting your feet towards the sky, gently windshield wipering your knees from side to side. This reduces tension in the lower back. When you feel comfortable, press up, continuing with your practice. The final classification of postures I would recommend avoiding during menstruation are any postures that include strong abdominal and core work. Now, as I already mentioned throughout the video, we want to avoid building pressure in the pelvic and abdominal cavity to avoid exacerbating period cramps, bloating, and excessive bleeding. Now, poses that I would recommend steering clear of would be plank pose, boat pose, or certain Bundas like Uddiyana Bandha and Mula Bandha, or Agni Sara. Now, the reason for this is that when we are performing these Bundas, what we're doing is we're pulling the muscles of the pelvis and the abdomen in and up. We're choosing to lock in the energy to direct it upwards towards the head. Now, we talked about the force of Apana Vayu that moves in a downward and outward motion during menstruation. So for this reason, we want to avoid pulling the energy inwards and upwards so that we're not disrupting this downward and outward force. It's especially important if you're prone to getting headaches during menstruation. Again, we don't want to exacerbate any of these symptoms. So what's a posture that you can do instead that will gently work the core while not making any period problems worse? Well, I would recommend just a gentle cat-cow motion. I'll demonstrate here. You want to start in a tabletop position. Your wrists are stacked underneath your shoulders and your knees underneath your hips. Your back is level. On the inhale, begin dropping your belly towards the earth as you raise your chin towards the sky. As you exhale, you begin rounding your back, tucking your chin in towards your chest. Follow this motion with your breath. Inhaling, belly drops. Exhaling, back rounds. This simultaneously stretches and strengthens the muscles of the back and the abdomen. Do this for as long as you like. Feels so good. I hope you found these suggestions helpful as you learned what poses you may want to avoid during menstruation. Again, I want to really put emphasis on the fact that only you can determine what's right for you at any given moment in time, especially while on your cycle. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that the next time you find yourself wanting to practice during your period, you feel confident knowing which postures to include and which ones you may want to avoid. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed today's yoga sequence. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the poses and their benefits, I invite you to click the link in the description below to get access to the full article and infographic.